Well, hello there. This is session number 3 of Genocide. We're going to talk about a more modern day genocide, about Rwanda. We're going to be talking about the Hutu and the Tutsi. We're going to be discussing the horror of April 1994. We could spend a great deal of time on the history of Rwanda. We could spend a great deal of time on who's to blame for this situation. Basically, the wrong people were put in charge after World War I, and a severe and horrible penalty were paid. Now, I want you to understand that this report is not pointing any fingers. It's just getting to the root cause of genocide. It's getting to the root of who was there and who wasn't there and what they did. And then we'll explore how old genocide is and where it actually came from. A small history. When the Tutsi decided that they wanted to take charge of their land again, it didn't work out so well. But you have to understand the composition of the state of Rwanda. 90% of those that lived there were Hutu. 9% were Tutsi. 74% of those that lived there, Hutu and Tutsi, were Christian. 24% belonged to the indigenous religion of the area. And only 1% were Muslims. The reason that we mention this, that many people want to write this off as a Muslim genocide. I think you'll be surprised at what you learn. I think you'll be angry about what you learn. Today there's a Roman Catholic priest at a medieval church an hour's drive from Paris who has been indicted by the United Nations Court for genocide, extermination, murder, and rape in Rwanda. The Catholic priest, Father Wenceslas, in 1994, when 800,000 Tutsis were killed, was noted for wearing a gun on his hip and colluding with the Hutu militia that murdered hundreds of people sheltered in his church. A Rwandan court convicted the priest of genocide and sentenced him to absentia for life in prison. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda spent years trying to bring him to trial. But the Catholic Church in France does not see any of this as a bar to serving as a priest, and has gone out of its way to defend this errant priest. It's not an isolated case. After the genocide, a network of clergy and church organizations brought priests and nuns with blood on their hands in Rwanda to Europe and sheltered them. They included Father Alfesi, who ordered the bulldozing of his own church with 2,000 Tutsis inside and had the survivors shot. Catholic monks helped him get to Italy, change his name, and become a parish priest in Florence. After Simone was exposed, the International Tribunal's chief prosecutor, Carla Della Ponte, accused the Vatican of obstructing his extradition to face trial. The Holy See told the priest was doing good works in Italy. Another Rwandan priest taken on in Italy, is facing charges of overseeing the massacre of disabled Tutsi children. The Vatican's reluctance to confront the murderers in its midst is rooted in the refusal to face up to the Church's complicity in mass murder. But as Rwanda marks the 20th anniversary of the genocide, the time has come for Pope Francis to follow his own lead on pedophile priests and apologize for the part played by the clergy in furnishing churches and turning them into extermination centers. The Vatican should accompany a plea for forgiveness and a calling to account of the priests who were complicit in the killing. For 2 decades, the Vatican has maintained that while individual clergy were guilty of terrible crimes, the Church, as an institution, bears no responsibility. The Holy See would prefer the world to focus on the more than 200 priests and nurses killed in genocide. But while there's no doubt there were courageous members of the clergy, many Tutsi survivors regard the Church as allied with the killers, and culpability as the beginning of the way at the top of the Catholic hierarchy in Rwanda. Archbishop Vincent was so closely attached to the Hutu power structure that for nearly 15 years he sat on the ruling party's Central Committee as it implemented the policies of discrimination and demonstration that laid the groundwork for the genocide. His political affiliations left him well placed to at least try to urge the regime to stop the killing in 1994, and to have been a strong moral voice in public against the slaughter. Instead, he was incapable even of calling the massacres a genocide, let alone condemning the politicians and military officers leading it. The Archbishop became so compromised that witnesses said he stood by as Tutsi priests, monks, and a nun were taken to be murdered. Many Inisiwa's bishops and priests were apologists for the killers by falsely trying to pin blame for the massacre on Paul Karagameyer's the Tutsi army. That sent a message to the murderers that the Church was not going to judge them. Some openly said that God had abandoned the Tutsis. The Organization for African Unity report on the genocide described the Church in Rwanda as carrying a heavy responsibility for failing to oppose and even promoting ethnic discrimination. It said the Church offered indispensable support to the Hutu regime during the killing and described the Church leaders as playing a conspicuously scandalous role in the genocide by failing to take a moral stand against it. This stance was easily interpreted by ordinary Christians as an implicit doctrine of killing, as was the close association of Church leaders with the leaders of the genocide, the report said. I went to see Musiage in his church in Gisor a few months ago. He denies the charges against him and defiantly defends carrying the gun during the genocide. He also remains unapologetically aligned with groups that keep alive the ideology that underpinned the genocide. Clearly, he is not going to apologize for his part in Rwanda's tragedy. All the more reason for the Pope to acknowledge that the Catholic Church failed in Rwanda in 1994, and it continued to do so by protecting such priests. Thanks for listening. We'll wrap up the series on genocide in session 4.